Two of WWE's most dangerous young powerhouses recently found themselves standing face to face, and this wasn't the kind of confrontation that felt like just another segment on television. Oba Femi and Bron Breakker represent two completely different versions of what WWE's next dominant superstar could look like. Bron has the explosive speed, wrestling pedigree, athleticism, and aggression that make him look like a human missile, while Oba has the size, raw strength, confidence, and intimidating presence that make him look like someone who could physically overpower almost anyone in the locker room. They didn't need a long exchange to make their point. Just standing across from each other was enough to raise a much bigger question. If WWE is searching for the next unstoppable powerhouse, is it Bron Breakker or Oba Femi? But before we can decide which of these two young stars has what it takes to become the next monster attraction, we have to understand the standard they are being compared against. Because there is one name that has represented dominance in WWE for more than 2 decades, a man who didn't simply become a superstar by winning championships, but by making some of the biggest names in wrestling look completely helpless. Brock Lesnar arrived in WWE with an almost frightening combination of size, speed, strength, and legitimate athletic ability, and it didn't take long before fans realized they were watching something different. Brock wasn't just another powerhouse. He looked like a man who could actually destroy anyone standing across the ring from him. From the moment Brock Lesnar began his rise, WWE presented him as a physical phenomenon. He was young, incredibly strong, explosively athletic, and had the kind of amateur wrestling background that made his power even more dangerous. He could lift opponents who were much larger than the average wrestler, throw them across the ring with ease, and then move with a speed that seemed impossible for someone his size. That combination became the foundation of his aura. Brock didn't need to convince people that he was dangerous because everything about him made the claim believable. His rise was also remarkably fast. Brock quickly moved from being an impressive newcomer to becoming one of WWE's biggest attractions, eventually winning the WWE Championship and establishing himself as one of the most dominant performers of his generation. But his legacy wasn't created simply because he collected championships. It was created because of the way he won. Brock could walk into a match against an established superstar and completely change the atmosphere. Suddenly, the opponent wasn't just trying to win a wrestling match, they were trying to survive Brock Lesnar. That became even more obvious when Brock evolved into the Beast Incarnate. His greatest moments came when WWE allowed him to look almost unstoppable. He destroyed John Cena, battled Roman Reigns, defeated Randy Orton, fought The Undertaker, and dominated countless other established stars. His matches became events because fans genuinely believed that something violent and unpredictable could happen the moment Brock stepped into the ring. His famous suplexes, his explosive takedowns, and his ability to suddenly end a match created an aura that very few wrestlers have ever been able to replicate, and that is the standard sitting behind the next generation of WWE powerhouses. Being big isn't enough. Being strong isn't enough. Being athletic isn't enough. Brock had all of those qualities, but what made him special was the way WWE combined them into an identity. He looked like a legitimate threat. He moved like an elite athlete. He fought like someone who knew he was stronger than everyone around him. Most importantly, when Brock entered the arena, fans immediately understood that the balance of power had changed. That brings us to Bron Breakker, because if there is one young WWE superstar whose name has repeatedly been connected to the next generation of powerhouses, it is Bron. The comparisons to Brock are obvious at first glance, but the deeper you look, the more interesting they become. Bron has the same kind of explosive intensity that made Brock so frightening. He can move at incredible speed for his size, he can hit with devastating force, and when he launches himself into an opponent, it doesn't look like a normal wrestling move. It looks like a collision, but Bron's connection to Brock goes beyond simply looking like a future powerhouse. Bron comes from one of wrestling's most famous families, carrying the Steiner name and the wrestling pedigree that comes with it. That background gives him a foundation based on amateur wrestling, physical conditioning, athleticism, and toughness. He wasn't simply handed a superstar appearance. He developed the kind of wrestling instincts that allow him to combine raw power with explosive movement. That is one of the reasons Bron naturally invites comparisons to Brock. Both men can make their opponents feel like they are fighting someone physically different from them. Bron can explode across the ring in an instant, and his spear has become one of the clearest examples of his style. But what really separates him is the intensity behind it. There is almost no hesitation when Bron attacks. He doesn't slowly build toward violence, he explodes, and then there is the respect between generations. Bron has spoken about looking up to established WWE stars and learning from those who came before him, while Brock has been one of the most respected physical competitors of his generation. That makes their connection more interesting than a simple fan comparison. Bron isn't just being called the next Brock because they have similar physiques or because both men are powerful. There is a sense that Bron understands what Brock represented and what it takes to reach that level. The bigger question is whether Brock himself could see something in Bron, because when a veteran with Brock's experience recognizes the potential of a younger powerhouse, that recognition carries weight. Brock knows what it takes to become a dominant attraction. He knows the difference between being a talented wrestler and being someone who can carry an entire division around them. Bron possesses many of the qualities that made Brock special, but he still has to build the career that proves he deserves those comparisons. And that is where the story becomes even more interesting, because while Bron has the explosiveness, there is another young superstar who may have the physical presence to rival anyone in WWE today. That man is Oba Femi. Oba's rise has been different from Bron's. He hasn't needed to rely on speed to make people notice him. His biggest weapon is the way he looks and carries himself. Oba Femi has the kind of physical presence that immediately tells the audience what they are supposed to believe. He looks powerful. He looks confident. He looks like someone who could pick up almost anyone in WWE and throw them across the ring. But the important thing is that Oba isn't simply a giant who moves slowly. He has athletic ability that makes his size even more dangerous. When you combine that with his confidence and intimidating aura, you get the kind of physical package WWE has historically used to create monster attractions. That is why the Brock comparison works for Oba in a completely different way. Bron reminds people of Brock because of his explosiveness and athletic intensity. Oba reminds people of the type of physical specimen WWE has traditionally turned into a dominant attraction. He has the size, the strength, and the presence to make fans believe that he could eventually become one of the most dangerous men in the company. But the most important part of this entire story isn't simply comparing Oba and Bron to Brock individually. It is what happens when you put Oba and Bron in the same conversation. Because now WWE has two young powerhouses coming from different directions, and both are trying to establish themselves as the future. Bron has the speed, Oba has the size. Bron has the explosiveness, Oba has the raw power. Bron can move like a much smaller athlete. Oba can overpower opponents with a physicality that feels almost unfair, and that is why their confrontation matters. When Oba Femi and Bron Breakker finally stood face to face, it wasn't difficult to understand what WWE was presenting. This was a collision between two potential future main event monsters. Bron didn't look intimidated by Oba's size, and Oba didn't look overwhelmed by Bron's reputation or explosiveness. Neither man needed to back away. Neither needed to prove anything with a long speech. Their presence did most of the talking. For Bron, standing across from Oba was another opportunity to show that he belongs in the conversation with WWE's biggest stars. He has already demonstrated that he can compete with powerful opponents, but Oba presents a different challenge. Bron can't simply rely on speed when he is standing across from someone who can absorb punishment and overpower him. If Bron wants to become the next dominant attraction, he has to prove that his explosiveness can overcome genuine physical power. For Oba, the confrontation is just as important. He has already established himself as one of the most physically imposing young wrestlers in WWE, but Bron represents something he can't simply overpower through size. Bron is faster, more explosive, and more experienced at the highest levels of WWE competition. If Oba wants to become a true monster attraction, he has to show that he can deal with someone who can attack him before he even gets the opportunity to use his strength. And that is where the comparison to Brock Lesnar becomes even more fascinating. Brock was never defined by one quality. He was powerful, but he was also incredibly athletic. He was fast, but he was also physically imposing. He could wrestle technically, but he could also turn a match into a fight. That complete package is what made Brock so difficult to replace. So when we compare Bron and Oba, the question isn't simply who is stronger. If we're talking about raw power and physical intimidation, Oba has the advantage. If we're talking about explosiveness and athleticism, Bron has the advantage. But neither man has completely proven that they can combine all of those qualities into the kind of aura Brock carried throughout his career. Bron may have the more complete athletic package right now. His wrestling background, speed, intensity, and ability to explode into an opponent make him incredibly versatile. He can work against smaller wrestlers, bigger wrestlers, technical wrestlers, and physical wrestlers without looking out of place. That versatility could eventually make him one of WWE's most valuable main event performers. But Oba has something that is extremely difficult to teach. Presence. He looks like a superstar before he even says a word. His size immediately separates him from most of the roster, and his confidence makes him feel like someone who expects to dominate. If WWE continues developing him correctly, Oba could become the kind of attraction that makes an entire division feel more dangerous. So who is closer to becoming the next Brock Lesnar? Right now, Bron Breakker may have the advantage in athleticism and explosiveness, while Oba Femi has the advantage in raw power and intimidation. Bron looks like the human missile. Oba looks like the wrecking machine. But Brock Lesnar was both. That is what makes the future so interesting. WWE doesn't necessarily need another Brock Lesnar. It needs someone who can create the same feeling Brock created when he walked through the curtain. Someone who makes the audience believe that the match could end at any second. Someone who doesn't just win, but makes his opponent question whether they can survive. Bron Breakker has already shown flashes of that. Oba Femi has already shown flashes of that, and now they are standing directly in each other's way. Their face-off was more than a moment between two young wrestlers. It was a glimpse at a possible future where WWE's next generation begins fighting for the position once occupied by men like Brock Lesnar. Bron represents speed, explosiveness, pedigree, and aggression. Oba represents size, strength, confidence, and intimidation. Both have qualities that could eventually make them dominant attractions. But the real test is still ahead, because Brock Lesnar's legacy wasn't created by potential. It was created by years of proving that when he stepped into the ring, he could back up every bit of the hype. Bron Breakker and Oba Femi now have the opportunity to build something of their own. Maybe one of them will become the next Beast. Maybe neither will. But after seeing these two men stand face to face, one thing is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. WWE's next generation of monsters is already here. And if Bron Breakker and Oba Femi continue on this path, the fight to determine who stands at the top could become one of the most important rivalries of the next era.